"You're a burden. We can't keep supporting you." I remember the way my brother said it, not loudly, not angrily, but calmly, almost tired, like he was announcing the weather, and somehow that hurt more. I was sitting at the kitchen table where we had celebrated birthdays, promotions, and Sunday dinners. My hands were wrapped around a mug of tea I hadn't touched. The steam had already faded, just like the warmth in the room. I had lost my job 3 weeks earlier. The company downsized. My position was no longer necessary. That was the phrase they used. Clean, polite, disposable, I thought home would feel different. At first, everyone had said the right things. "It's temporary. You'll find something better. Don't stress." But encouragement has an expiration date when money is involved. That evening, my brother stood near the counter with his arms crossed. My father sat silently, staring at the floor. My sister leaned against the wall, avoiding my eyes. "We've covered your bills twice." My brother continued, "Groceries, utilities, we can't keep doing this." "It had only been 3 weeks. I'm applying everywhere," I said softly. "I had 2 interviews already. I just need a little more time." The word time seemed to irritate him. "Time doesn't pay expenses." The air shifted. Something unspoken floated between us, something older than my unemployment. I had always been the soft one in the family, the emotional one, the one who believed loyalty meant something permanent. When my brother struggled years ago, I helped him rewrite his resume every night after work. When my sister couldn't afford her course, I quietly transferred money without mentioning it again. I never kept score. Apparently they did. "This house can't carry dead weight," he added, dead weight. The words pressed into my chest like a hand. My father finally spoke, but not to defend me. "Maybe it's best if you stay with a friend for a while." "A friend?" I nodded slowly. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't hurt, but because something inside me had gone strangely still. "Okay," I said. That seemed to surprise them. Maybe they expected an argument. Maybe they wanted tears to justify their decision. But I was too shocked to fight. My brother exhaled, relieved. "We already packed your things." That part landed differently. "Already?" I asked. My sister glanced at him. We didn't want it to be awkward. I stood up carefully, like the room might tilt. I walked to my bedroom. 2 suitcases sat on the bed. My closet was empty. My framed photos were stacked neatly on top of folded clothes. It was organized, efficient, thoughtful, even. They had prepared for my departure before finishing the conversation. That's when I understood this wasn't a discussion. It was an announcement. I sat on the edge of the bed and touched the zipper of one suitcase. 3 weeks, that's all it took for me to become temporary. Memories began replaying quietly in my mind. Family dinners where I paid the bill because you're doing well now. Holidays where I bought the expensive gifts. The time my brother said, "You're the stable one. You'll always land on your feet." Stable. I wondered if that was code for expendable. When I came back into the living room, my brother handed me my house key. "We'll need this, of course." I placed it gently on the table instead. "I hope things work out for you." My sister said, her voice polite. Distant work out for me, as if I were a project that had failed. My father still didn't look at me. I picked up my suitcases. They felt heavier than they should have, not because of the clothes, but because of what they represented. I paused at the door, waiting for someone to say, "You don't have to go." No one did, so I opened it myself. The hallway outside felt colder than usual, or maybe that was just me. When the door shut behind me, I heard the lock click almost immediately. It echoed. For a moment, I stood there staring at the wood grain of the door that used to mean safety. I thought about knocking, about asking them to reconsider, but something stopped me. It wasn't pride. It was clarity. If I had to convince my own family that I deserved space in their home during my worst month, then I had already overstayed, not physically, but emotionally. I walked toward the elevator, with my suitcases rolling beside me. The building lobby smelled like cleaning spray and fresh paint. Life going on as usual. Outside, the city hummed, cars passed, people hurried by. No one knew that my entire sense of belonging had just been folded into two medium-sized bags. I pulled out my phone and opened my contacts. There were a few friends I could call, but before dialing anyone, I looked up at the sky, pale, wide, indifferent. For the first time, I felt something unfamiliar rising beneath the hurt. Not anger, not revenge, just a quiet question. If I was such a burden, why did I feel lighter walking away? The first night after I left, I didn't cry. I thought I would. I thought the weight of it would break me the moment I lay down somewhere unfamiliar. But instead, I felt suspended, like my body hadn't caught up with what my heart already knew. I stayed at my friend Ayesha's small apartment across town. She didn't ask too many questions. She just handed me a blanket, made space in her closet, and said, "Stay as long as you need." That sentence alone nearly undid me. Stay as long as you need, no expiration date, no calculation. The quiet of her apartment was different from my family's house. There were no heavy silences here, no unspoken judgments hanging in the air, just normal life, dishes in the sink, the hum of traffic outside, her soft music playing while she worked. But in my mind, I kept replaying that night. Dead weight, burden, we already packed your things. The more I thought about it, the clearer something became. That conversation hadn't started 3 weeks ago when I lost my job. It had started long before that. I began noticing patterns I had ignored for years. Whenever I succeeded, there was pride, but also tension. When I got promoted last year, my brother had joked, "Must be nice to have everything handed to you." I laughed it off at the time. I had worked 60-hour weeks for that promotion. When I paid for our father's medical bill without being asked, my sister said, "You like being the hero, don't you?" I thought they were teasing. Now, in the quiet, those comments sounded different. It wasn't my unemployment that made me a burden. It was my independence. As long as I was strong, helpful, reliable, I fit into the family story. I was useful. I balanced things, I absorbed tension. But the moment I needed something back, even briefly, the equation shifted. I wasn't the stable one anymore. I was a liability. That realization hurt more than losing my job. During the day, I applied everywhere. Marketing agencies, small startups, freelance projects. I rewrote my resume so many times I could recite it from memory. Rejection emails started arriving politely and consistently. While your qualifications are impressive, but not chosen. At night, when Ayesha was asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I didn't miss the house itself. I missed the idea of it, the belief that family meant unconditional space. But the truth was unfolding slowly, like film developing in a darkroom. They hadn't just packed my bags. They had prepared themselves emotionally long before I walked out that door. One afternoon, about a month after I left, I returned quietly to the neighborhood to pick up a package I had accidentally delivered there. I didn't tell them I was coming. I just knocked. My sister opened the door halfway. "Oh," she said, surprised. Not warm, just surprised. "I'm just here for a package," I explained. She hesitated before letting me in. The house looked the same, but my room door was open. I glanced down the hallway instinctively. There was a desk inside now. My brother's old office chair, shelves rearranged. It didn't look temporary, it looked claimed. "You moved things around," I said carefully. My brother appeared behind her. We had to make use of the space. The space, not my room. I nodded slowly. Something inside me settled permanently then. They hadn't expected me to come back. Not just that day, but ever. On my way out, my father finally met my eyes. For a second, I thought he might say something. Apologize. Explain instead, he said. I hope you're figuring things out. I almost smiled. I was, just not in the way he meant. That night, back at Ayesh's apartment, I opened my laptop again, but this time something felt different. I wasn't applying out of desperation anymore. I was applying out of determination. There's a difference. Desperation asks to be accepted. Determination builds something that doesn't beg. I started taking small freelance projects, social media management for a local cafe, branding work for a boutique. The pay wasn't much, but it was mine. Every invoice I sent felt like a quiet stitch repairing something inside me. I stopped checking my family group chat. I stopped waiting for a "how are you?" Silence became my boundary. And in that silence, I began to hear my own thoughts more clearly than ever before. Maybe I had been too available, too quick to give, too eager to prove my value through usefulness. Maybe love without boundaries isn't love. Maybe it's permission. One evening, as I walked home from a client meeting, I passed a row of billboards downtown. Huge faces stared down confidently. Entrepreneurs, authors, business owners. For a brief second, I imagined what it would feel like to see my own work displayed that boldly. The thought didn't feel impossible. It felt distant but possible. 6 months ago, I believed home was a place where I was safe no matter what. Now, I was beginning to understand something quieter. Safety isn't where you're tolerated. It's where you're respected. And respect, I was learning, sometimes begins the moment you stop asking for it. There's a version of me from 6 months ago who would have announced every small win. The old me would have texted the family group chat the moment I landed my first freelance client. She would have sent screenshots. Shared excitement, waited for approval disguised as praise. The new me kept quiet, not out of bitterness. Out of protection. The freelance project started small. A cafe that needed help with branding. A fitness coach struggling with online visibility. A boutique owner who didn't understand why her social media posts weren't converting. I worked from Ayesh's kitchen table, laptop balanced between coffee cups and notebooks. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. I began waking up earlier than I ever had before. Not because I had to clock in somewhere, but because something inside me had shifted. For the first time, I wasn't trying to prove I was valuable. I was building value. Every rejection email from larger companies still stung, but it didn't crush me anymore. I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I was choosing myself in small, consistent ways. There were nights I doubted everything. Nights I questioned if my brother had been right. What if I really was too soft, too emotional, too unrealistic? But then I would look at the spreadsheets I kept, tracking income that, while modest, was growing. I would reread emails from clients thanking me for understanding their vision. You really listened. No one in my family had ever said that to me. Listening had been expected from me, not offered to me. Around the 3rd month, something unexpected happened. One of the boutique campaigns I had worked on began gaining attention online. A local influencer shared it. Engagement tripled. The owner called me nearly in tears. "You changed everything," she said. No one had ever told me that without sarcasm. She recommended me to a friend who ran a women-led startup focused on sustainable products. They needed someone to rebrand their image before launching a city-wide campaign. The meeting was downtown. I remember walking into that glass, walled office building, my reflection staring back at me in every surface. 6 months ago, I would have walked in hoping they liked me. This time, I walked in knowing I had something to offer. The presentation went smoothly. I spoke calmly, clearly. I didn't oversell myself. I didn't shrink either. A week later, they called. They wanted me not just as a freelancer, but as the creative lead for their entire launch campaign. It wasn't a massive corporation. It wasn't the kind of job that impresses at family dinners, but it was mine. The campaign would include digital ads, event branding, and something I had never worked on before, a downtown billboard to mark their launch week. A billboard. When the marketing director said it casually during our planning session, my heart paused. I didn't say anything. I just wrote it down. Over the next 2 months, I poured myself into that project. Late nights, early mornings, brainstorming sessions, edits, revisions, quiet confidence. There was no dramatic transformation. No sudden glow-up montage. Just discipline. Just showing up. Some evenings, when exhaustion crept in, I would think about that locked door, about the sound it made when it clicked behind me. Instead of feeling anger, I felt clarity. If they hadn't closed that door, I might have stayed small inside it. By the 5th month, I moved into my own tiny studio apartment. It wasn't big, barely enough room for a couch and a bed, but every corner of it felt earned. The first night I slept there, I sat on the floor surrounded by unpacked boxes and cried quietly, not because I was hurt anymore, but because I realized something powerful. I had survived without becoming hard. I was still gentle. Just not available to be diminished. The week of the campaign launch arrived faster than I expected. The company organized a small event downtown. The billboard reveal would go live the same morning. I walked past that same row of billboards I had stared at months ago. My chest felt steady. The design we had created featured bold typography, clean imagery, and a central message about rebuilding with purpose. My creative direction, my strategy, my vision. But what mattered most wasn't the size of the display. It was the fact that I had built something without applause, without validation, without running back to say, "Look at me now," because this wasn't about being seen by them. It was about finally seeing myself clearly. That night, as I stood across the street waiting for the billboard lights to switch on, I felt something settle deep inside me. Not pride, not revenge, peace, the kind that doesn't need witnesses, the kind that grows quietly when you stop asking people who underestimated you to finally understand. And when the lights flickered on, illuminating the work I had helped create, I didn't think about the house I had left behind. I thought about the girl who walked away with 2 suitcases and no certainty. She wasn't a burden. She was becoming. The morning the billboard went live, I almost didn't go. Not because I wasn't proud, but because I didn't need to stand beneath it to feel complete. Still, something inside me wanted to witness the moment, not as proof to anyone else, but as quiet acknowledgement to myself. So I walked downtown just after sunrise, when the city was stretching awake and the streets were softer. The air was cool, traffic lights blinked lazily, and there it was, tall, bright, unapologetic. My campaign design filled the space with calm confidence. Clean lines, intentional words, a message about rebuilding with purpose. I stood across the street, hands tucked into my coat pockets, and let myself feel it fully. 6 months ago, I left home with 2 suitcases and the echo of the word burden ringing in my ears. Now, my work towered above one of the busiest streets in the city. Not because I fought anyone, not because I proved anyone wrong loudly, but because I stayed with myself. I took a photo not to post, not to send, just to keep, and then I went home. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was my sister. I hadn't heard from her in weeks. For a moment, I considered letting it ring out. But avoidance wasn't strength, so I answered, "Hi." I said calmly. There was a pause on the other end. "Is that your work on the billboard downtown?" I glanced out my apartment window, sunlight spilling across the floor. "Yes," I replied. "It's part of a campaign I led." Another pause. We drove past it this morning. She continued. "Daniel recognized your name on the credits at the bottom. Daniel, my brother. I imagined them sitting in the car." Looking up, seeing something they hadn't expected, "Oh," I said softly, "you didn't tell us you were working on something like that." The words were neutral, but underneath them I heard it, a confusion, maybe even discomfort. I didn't think it was necessary. I answered honestly. Silence stretched between us. Then she said something I hadn't anticipated. "We didn't realize you were doing this well. Doing this well." I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes briefly. 6 months ago, I would have rushed to fill the silence. Reassured her made it easier. Now I let the quiet exist. "I'm okay." I said simply, another pause. "Dad wants to know if you'd like to come by for dinner sometime." There it was, not an apology, an invitation. I thought about that night, the packed suitcases, the changed lock, the office chair. Now sitting in what used to be my room, I didn't feel anger anymore, but I did feel clarity. "I appreciate that," I said carefully, "but I think some space has been good for all of us." She didn't argue. Maybe she heard the steadiness in my voice, the lack of accusation, the absence of pleading. "You've changed," she said quietly. I smiled to myself. "No," I replied, "I've just learned." After we hung up, I sat in the stillness of my apartment. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel superior. I felt balanced. That afternoon, my brother texted me for the first time since I left. "Saw the billboard, looks impressive." No exclamation mark, no warmth, but it was something. I stared at the message for a moment. The old me would have used this opportunity. A subtle reminder, a sharp comment, a clever line about burdens. Instead, I typed, "Thank you. I hope you're doing well too," and I meant it. Because emotional strength isn't about making someone feel what you felt. It's about refusing to carry resentment longer than necessary. A week later, I ran into my father at a grocery store near their neighborhood. It was accidental, unexpected. He looked older somehow, or maybe I was just seeing him clearly for the first time. We stood there between shelves of cereal boxes, facing each other. "I saw your work," he said. I nodded. "You always were determined." He added quietly. Not "we were wrong," not "I'm sorry," but in his voice there was something softer, regret perhaps, or recognition. I had to be. I replied gently. He studied me for a moment, as if trying to understand who I had become. "I hope you know," he started, then stopped. "I hope you're happy." I held his gaze steadily. "I am." And for the first time, that wasn't something I was hoping would happen. It was something I knew. We didn't hug dramatically. There were no tears, no cinematic reconciliation. Just two adults standing in the aisle of a grocery store, understanding that love without respect had consequences, natural ones. As I walked back to my car, I realized something profound. They had looked up at a billboard and seen my name, but I had looked inward and found my worth, and that mattered more. I wasn't a burden. I was a woman who had learned that home is not the place that keeps you when you're convenient. It's the place you build within yourself when you choose dignity over desperation. Sometimes people don't recognize your value until you remove your availability, and sometimes the most powerful form of justice is simply living well, peacefully, and without needing them to finally agree. That billboard will come down eventually, campaigns end, but the self-respect I built in the silence, that stays.